30 years old. Been working here for 8 years. Clawed my way up from junior analyst. Every performance review, I make sure they know. I expect the same compensation as my male colleagues. Actually pulled salary data from Glassdoor and industry reports to prove I was being underpaid 2 years ago. Walked into my boss's office with a printed spreadsheet showing that men with my exact credentials were making 8% more. I told him either he fixes this, or I'm filing a complaint with HR and looking for new opportunities. I've got my raise within 2 weeks. Felt like I had won something important. Like I was standing up for something that mattered, because it did matter. It still matters. I work the same hours, produce the same quality work, have the same certifications. There is literally no reason I should make less money because of what's between my legs. Fast forward to last month. Company hired a new guy, Derek, same level as me, same years of experience. Found out through the office gossip network that he negotiated a starting salary that's $4,000 more than what I currently make. $4,000. I literally have seniority here, and he walks in making more. Spent an entire weekend building a presentation with compensation comparisons, performance metrics, client retention rates, scheduled a meeting with my boss and the department head, brought printed copies of everything, highlighted the relevant sections, told them this is discrimination, plain and simple. I don't care if he negotiated better, the market rate is the market rate. Either I get bumped up to match him plus a seniority differential, or I'm escalating this. They tried to give me some bullshit about budget constraints and different negotiation outcomes. I cut them off and said, that's not how equal pay works. You don't get to pay people differently for the same job based on who asks more aggressively. That's just gender discrimination, with extra steps, because we all know who's socialized to negotiate aggressively and who isn't. Got my raise, again. Derek seemed kind of annoyed when he found out through the grapevine that I'd made waves about his salary. Don't care. Not my problem. He doesn't get to benefit from systemic inequality. This is what equality looks like. It's not always comfortable. Around the same time, all this is happening, I'm seeing this guy Michael, met him through a friend's dinner party. He works in medical device sales. Good looking, stable job, seems emotionally available. We've been on maybe 5 dates at this point. He suggested we grab dinner at this nice Italian place downtown. Dinner was great. Conversation flowed naturally. He made me laugh. Check comes and he just looks at it, then looks at me. I wait for him to pick it up because that's what you do on a date. He goes, should we split this? I actually felt my stomach drop a little, not like anxiety, more like disappointment mixed with confusion. I said something like, oh, sure, I guess. We split it exactly down the middle. He even calculated his portion to account for the fact that I didn't order an appetizer. The whole rest of the evening felt off after that. Like something had shifted, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what. He walked me to my car and kissed me goodnight, and it was fine, but I felt weird about the whole thing. Spent the drive home trying to figure out why I was so bothered. Like, logically, I know there's nothing wrong with splitting a check. I make good money. I'm financially independent. I don't need a man to pay for my food. But it felt wrong somehow. It felt like he wasn't really trying. Like he wasn't putting in effort. My mum always told me that a man who's serious about you will show it, and one of the ways he shows it is by providing. Not that I need providing for, obviously. I provide for myself. But it's the gesture, it's the intention behind it. When a man pays for dinner, it signals that he sees you as valuable, that he's willing to invest in you. Michael texted me a few days later, asking if I wanted to get drinks. I was still kind of annoyed about the dinner thing, so I didn't respond right away. Talked to my friend Sarah about it. She said I was being ridiculous, and that I should be happy he sees me as an equal. But that's not what it felt like. It felt like he was being cheap, not like he was respecting my equality. Eventually, I did go out with him again. Drinks turned into several more dates over the next month. He continued to suggest we split everything. Coffee, movie tickets, an Uber we shared. Everything. I continued to feel increasingly annoyed about it, even though I could never articulate exactly why. Then one night we were at his place watching a movie. I made some comment about how my car had been making a weird noise. He immediately offered to take a look at it, said his dad taught him about cars. I felt this warm feeling in my chest, like finally, this is what I want. Brought my car over, that weekend, and he spent 2 hours diagnosing the problem. Turned out I needed new brake pads, and he offered to help me install them to save on labor costs. We went to the auto parts store together, and when we got to the counter, he just automatically paid for the brake pads. Didn't ask, didn't suggest splitting it, just handed over his credit card. I felt so happy about this. Genuinely happy. Like this was him taking care of me, stepping up, being a man about it. It didn't even occur to me until later that I had been annoyed about splitting $15 drinks, but perfectly happy to let him pay for $120 brake pads. When it did occur to me, I pushed the thought away because the situations were obviously different. The brake pads were him doing something nice, choosing to help me with something I needed. The drinks were, I don't know, different somehow. Michael and I kept seeing each other, and I started noticing this pattern when we'd go out to eat or do activities. He'd suggest splitting costs. But when it came to things like picking me up so I didn't have to drive, or carrying heavy things, or any kind of physical task, he'd just do it without asking. And I liked that division. I liked that he saw me as someone he should help and protect in those ways. But I wished he'd just pick up the check at restaurants more often. We had been dating for about 3 months when I brought it up. Tried to be casual about it. Said something like, it would be nice if you got dinner sometimes. He looked genuinely confused. Said, I thought you'd appreciate splitting things. You seem really independent. I told him I am independent, financially independent. I make my own money and pay my own bills. But that doesn't mean I don't want to be treated well. He asked what I meant by treated well. I struggled to explain it in a way that made sense. Ended up saying something about how, when a man takes a woman out, there's a traditional expectation that he pays, and that fulfilling that expectation shows respect and interest. He pointed out that I've mentioned multiple times how important equality is to me. Brought up that I'd told him about fighting for equal pay at work. He said he assumed I'd want equality in our relationship too. I felt myself getting frustrated because he was conflating things that weren't the same. Told him that equality in the workplace and traditional dating roles aren't contradictory. One is about systemic fairness, and the other is about romantic gestures. He didn't look convinced, but he dropped it. Started paying for more of our dates after that conversation. I felt better about things. Felt like he was finally showing up the way I wanted him to. Then something happened at work that made me think about all of this in a way I didn't particularly enjoy. We have these monthly team meetings where we discuss ongoing projects and strategy. I'm usually pretty vocal in these meetings. I've never been shy about sharing my opinions. There's this older guy on the team, Richard, who has this annoying habit of interrupting people. He does it to everyone, but I noticed he does it to me and the other women on the team significantly more often. One meeting, he cut me off 3 times while I was presenting quarterly results. A third time it happened, I stopped mid-sentence and said, Richard, I'm going to need you to let me finish my thought. He got all defensive, said he was just trying to add context. I said he could add context when I was done speaking. Bit of an awkward silence, but I continued my presentation. I felt good about standing up for myself, about not letting him dominate the conversation just because he's a loud, older man who thinks his input is always necessary. Meeting ended, and my boss pulled me aside. Said he appreciated my contributions, but maybe I could try to be more collaborative in how I communicate. I asked him point blank if he would have said that to a man who stood up for himself. He got uncomfortable and said it wasn't about gender. I told him it absolutely was about gender, and that I wasn't going to sit quietly while Richard interrupted me. If that makes me seem non-collaborative, then maybe the problem is people's expectations about how women should communicate. Boss backed off. I felt vindicated. 2 days later, there was an after-work happy hour that a bunch of us went to. Just a casual thing. No clients, just co-workers getting drinks. I was standing at the bar ordering when this guy next to me, not from our company, started chatting me up. Normal bar conversation at first. Where are you from? What do you do? Then he started moving closer, getting more persistent. I asked for my number. I said I was seeing someone. He kept pushing, said we could just be friends. I was getting uncomfortable, but trying to stay polite. Then he put his hand on my lower back. I stepped away and told him I wasn't interested. He called me a bitch. Richard, the same Richard, who I'd called out in the meeting, immediately stepped between us, told the guy to back off, stood there until the guy left. Richard asked if I was okay, offered to stay nearby if the guy came back. I thanked him and felt genuinely grateful that he'd intervened. Didn't think about the contradiction until I was lying in bed that night. I had literally called Richard out for talking over me in a professional setting because I don't need men speaking for me or treating me like I can't handle myself. But I was genuinely relieved and grateful when he physically intervened with the aggressive guy at the bar, expected him to protect me in that situation, wanted him to step in. If I really believed in complete equality, shouldn't I have handled the bar situation myself? Shouldn't I have told Richard I didn't need his help? But I did need his help, or at least I wanted it. The guy was bigger than me, aggressive, potentially dangerous. Having Richard there made me feel safe. Isn't that what men are supposed to do? Step up when women are in threatening situations? Tried to reconcile these thoughts, but got annoyed with myself for even questioning it. The situations were different, obviously. One was about professional respect, and the other was about physical safety. I fell asleep before I could think about it more. A few weeks later, Michael and I went to a concert together. I bought the tickets because I wanted to see this particular band, and he was ambivalent. Cost about $60 each. Show was great, we had a good time. Afterwards, we were walking back to his car and passed by a guy sitting on the sidewalk asking for money. Michael pulled out his wallet and gave the guy a 20. Didn't make a big deal about it, just handed it over and kept walking. I felt this spike of irritation that I couldn't fully explain. Later, when we were back at my place, I brought it up. Asked him why he gave that guy money. Michael seemed surprised by the question. Said the guy looked like I needed it. I said, that's not really the point. You don't know what he's going to spend it on. Michael said he didn't really care what the guy spent it on. It was $20, and maybe it would help. I told him it just seemed irresponsible. Like if he has $20 to give away to random people, he should be taking me to nicer restaurants. The words were out of my mouth before I really thought about them. Michael stared at me for a second. Then he said, I thought we had agreed to split most things equally. I didn't realize you wanted me to be taking you to expensive restaurants. I felt defensive immediately. Told him it's not about expensive restaurants, it's about priorities. He's careful about splitting coffee costs with me, but he'll throw $20 at a stranger. Michael said those things aren't related and I'm welcome to spend my money however I want, just like he is. I said, fine, whatever. I'm not trying to control his money. But I was annoyed for the rest of the night. The truth was, I did think he should prioritize spending money on me over random homeless guys. Not because I needed his money, but because I'm his girlfriend, and that's how you show someone they matter to you. You invest in them, you treat them, you provide for them. But I couldn't say that directly, because I also believe I don't need a man's money, and I'm perfectly capable of providing for myself. Both things felt true at the same time. Started noticing this kind of pattern everywhere in my life. At work, I was constantly vigilant about equal treatment, equal opportunities, equal recognition. When they were planning a big client pitch and initially only assigned male team members, I demanded to be included. Made a whole case about how diverse perspectives strengthen our approach and how client-facing opportunities need to be distributed equally. We've got myself added to the team. Pitch, meeting day, I wore my most professional outfit, prepared extensively, contributed significantly to the presentation. Afterwards, we all went to dinner with the client, senior partner from our firm, paid for everything. The client made some comment about how he appreciated us taking him out. I felt good about this, felt like this is how business should work. The firm demonstrates value by hosting the client properly. Didn't occur to me until much later that I had fought to be included in this dinner as an equal team member. But I had no problem with the male senior partner automatically picking up the check for the entire table, including me. If we're all equal contributors to the pitch, shouldn't we all chip in equally for the dinner? But that thought felt wrong, felt like it missed the point somehow. The senior partner paying was him representing the firm, not him treating me specifically. It was different from Michael splitting brunch costs. Had to be different. Even though I couldn't fully articulate why. My lease was coming up for renewal, and my landlord increased the rent by $200 a month. I was complaining about this to Michael. He mentioned that his place was bigger, and his rent was less than what I'd be paying after the increase. Suggested I could move in with him, split his current rent, We'd both save money. I felt immediately resistant to this idea, even though it made perfect logical sense. I told him I thought it was too soon. We'd only been dating for 6 months. He said that was fair. Just an option. But the real reason I didn't want to do it wasn't timing. It was that moving in together and splitting rent felt too transactional. Felt like roommates, not a couple. In my mind, if I was going to live with a boyfriend, I should be moving into a place he's providing, not paying half of his current rent like we're college kids with a shared lease. Didn't tell Michael any of this because I knew it contradicted everything I claimed to believe about financial independence. I make my own money, I pay my own bills, I don't need a man to provide housing for me. But I also didn't want to be a financial equal partner in that specific way. Wanted him to be established enough, successful enough, that me moving in wouldn't require my financial contribution. Or, at least, that's what it felt like I wanted, deep down, even though I'd never admit it out loud. Ended up renewing my own lease at the higher rent. One of my co-workers, Jennifer, announced she was getting married. We all went out for her bachelorette party. Bunch of us at a nice restaurant, drinking wine, talking about her wedding plans. Jennifer mentioned that her fiancé makes significantly more money than she does. Said they'd discussed finances and decided his income would cover their mortgage and major expenses, while her income would go towards savings and discretionary spending. One of the other women said that sounded like a good arrangement. I found myself feeling almost jealous. Jennifer gets to work, her normal job, contribute to their life together, but not carry the weight, their major expenses. She has a partner who out-earns her enough that she has that security. But then Jennifer said something about how she's going to let her fiancé make the final decisions about their investments since it's mostly his money. I immediately jumped in and said she shouldn't do that. Told her that giving up financial decision-making power in a relationship is dangerous. She needs to be an equal partner in all money decisions, regardless of who makes more. Otherwise, she's setting herself up for an unbalanced dynamic where he has control. Jennifer seemed a little taken aback. He said she trusts him, and he's better with investment stuff anyway. I told her trust isn't the point, equality is the point. She shouldn't diminish herself or her right to equal say just because he brings in more income. I felt very strongly about this as I was saying it. One of the other women pointed out that I'd just expressed envy about Jennifer's arrangement, where her fiancé covers their major expenses. But now I was criticizing the very dynamic that makes that arrangement possible. I said those things aren't contradictory. Jennifer can benefit from her fiancé's higher income without giving up her equal partnership rights. The woman said, but if he's covering the mortgage and major expenses from his income, doesn't he get more say in how that money is spent? I said no, absolutely not. That's how financial abuse starts. Marriage is a partnership, and all decisions should be equal, regardless of income disparity. But even as I said it, I felt confused about my own position. Because wouldn't I want exactly what Jennifer has? A partner who makes enough that I don't have to stress about major expenses, but I still get equal say in everything? That sounds ideal, actually. Contribute my income to our shared life, but not be solely responsible for keeping us afloat, and maintain complete, equal decision-making power about how all money is spent. Is that having it both ways? Pushed the thought down and ordered another glass of wine. Michael and I had been dating for almost 9 months when we took a weekend trip together. Drove up the coast to this little beach town, rented a room at a bed and breakfast. I had assumed Michael would book and pay for the room since he suggested the trip. He sent me a request for half the cost on one of those payment apps. I felt that familiar annoyance again. Paid my half but made some comment about how I thought this was supposed to be a romantic getaway. He said it was romantic. Why does romance require him to pay for my share of the room? I didn't have a good answer, so I just dropped it. Trip itself was nice. We walked on the beach, had good dinners, relaxed. Second night, we went to a nicer restaurant, the kind of place with a real dress code and a wine list. Dinner was amazing. We ordered appetizers and entrees and dessert. Split a bottle of wine. Check came, and it was expensive, like $250. Michael looked at it and then looked at me. I looked back at him. He said, "This is more than I was planning to spend. Would you be okay splitting it?" I felt anger rise up in my chest. Told him he's the one who made the reservation at an expensive restaurant. If he wasn't prepared to pay for it, he should have chosen somewhere else. Michael said he chose it because I'd mentioned wanting to go somewhere nice. I thought we'd split it like we split most things. I said, I don't want to split a $250 dinner on a romantic trip. He asked me why I expect him to pay for this, but I fought to split costs equally at work. I told him he was being deliberately obtuse. Those are completely different contexts, and he knows it. Romantic relationships aren't the same as professional environments. He said he's trying to understand my perspective, but it seems inconsistent to him. Claims to value equality, but only in contexts where it benefits me. I called him an asshole and went outside. Stood on the sidewalk trying to calm down. He came out a few minutes later and said he'd paid for dinner. Said he didn't want to fight about it. But the whole drive home the next day was tense. He kept asking me to explain the difference between wanting equal treatment at work versus traditional treatment in dating. I kept telling him he was comparing apples and oranges. Work is about systemic fairness and overcoming discrimination. Dating is about courtship and romance and gender dynamics that have nothing to do with workplace equality. He said, gender dynamics are gender dynamics, regardless of context. Either we have traditional gender roles or we have equality. Can't pick and choose. I told him that's a false dichotomy and shows he doesn't really understand feminism. Feminism is about choice and agency. I can choose to want equal pay and choose to want a man who pays for dates. Those choices aren't contradictory. They're both expressions of my agency. Michael went quiet for a while after that. Then he said, so feminism means you get to choose whatever benefits you most in any situation, and I'm just supposed to accept contradictory expectations? I told him if he feels that way, maybe we shouldn't be dating. He didn't argue with that. We broke up basically as soon as we got back to the city. I was upset about it, but also relieved. Clearly, he just didn't get it, and I didn't need to waste my time explaining basic concepts to someone who wasn't willing to understand. Talked to Sarah about the breakup. She asked what happened, and I explained the whole fight about dinner and his accusations about me being inconsistent. Sarah was quiet for a minute. Then she said, do you see what he's saying at all? I asked her whose side she was on. She said she's on my side, but maybe Michael had a small point about the contradiction. I can't expect to be treated exactly the same as men at work, but differently than men in dating. I felt betrayed. Told Sarah, she, of all people, should understand that workplace equality and romantic dynamics are separate things. She said they're separate, but they're both based on gender. Can't say gender doesn't matter in one context, and then say it totally matters in another context. I said yes, you absolutely can, because context is what matters. The context of systemic workplace discrimination is completely different from the context of dating. Sarah dropped it, but I could tell she thought I was wrong. Started thinking maybe I needed new friends who actually understood feminism. Went on a few dates with other guys over the next couple months. None of them went anywhere. One guy was too eager to pay for everything, and it felt patronizing, like he thought I couldn't afford my own drinks. Another guy wanted to split literally everything down to individual menu items, and it felt petty and unromantic. Couldn't find the right balance. Someone who'd treat me as an equal, but also treat me special. Someone who'd respect my professional accomplishments but also want to take care of me. Didn't seem like too much to ask, but apparently it was. Meanwhile at work there was a situation with a new hire. Company brought in a woman, Amanda, for a director-level position. She was younger than the typical director, only 32, but apparently had impressive credentials. I was happy to see them hiring a woman for a leadership role. I felt like progress, like the company was finally taking diversity seriously. Amanda started, and within a month, I couldn't stand her. She had this way of being overly assertive in meetings that felt performative. Like she was constantly trying to prove she deserved to be there. She'd cut people off, dominate discussions, shoot down ideas without really considering them. Reminded me of the worst stereotypes of aggressive male executives. I mentioned to a colleague that I thought Amanda's management style was too abrasive. Colleague, a guy named Tom, said, "Isn't that what we want though? Women who don't apologize for taking up space?" I said there's a difference between being confident and being an asshole. Tom said, "When men manage that way, we call it leadership." I told him that's a false equivalence. Amanda isn't being a strong leader. She's being dismissive and closed-minded. He didn't look convinced. A few weeks later, Amanda called me into her office. Said she'd heard I had concerns about her management approach. Asked if I wanted to discuss it directly with her. I felt put on the spot. Told her I just thought she could be more collaborative, more open to input. Amanda said she's plenty open to good input, but she's not going to waste time on bad ideas just to make people feel heard. Said that's the difference between her and a lot of managers. She actually makes decisions instead of trying to build consensus on everything. I said, collaborative decision-making isn't a weakness. She said she didn't say it was a weakness, but it's not her style, and her results speak for themselves. Then she said something that really bothered me. I said, I notice you don't talk about male managers this way. I've heard you defend assertive leadership when it's men. I told her that's not true and not fair. She said she's not here to be liked. She's here to deliver results. And if that makes people uncomfortable, they can take it up with the executives who hired her. Meeting ended, and I felt angry. Angry that she'd accused me of having a double standard. I criticize male managers all the time, Richard being a prime example. But something about the accusation stuck with me in an uncomfortable way. Did I judge Amanda more harshly than I'd judge a man doing the exact same things? I wanted to say no, but I honestly wasn't sure. Maybe I did expect women in leadership to be more collaborative, more emotionally intelligent. But isn't that fair? Shouldn't women lead differently than men? Isn't the whole point that we bring different qualities to leadership? If Amanda is just going to replicate toxic masculine management styles, then what's even the point of having women in leadership? But then isn't that exactly the kind of thinking that keeps women out of leadership in the first place? The idea that we have to lead like women instead of just leading effectively? I genuinely didn't know how to reconcile these thoughts. Spent a lot of time over the next few weeks just feeling confused about things I thought I had figured out. Started dating someone new, guy named Alex. Alex was different from Michael, more traditionally masculine. Had this confident energy, made decisions without overthinking them, naturally took charge of situations. I liked it, felt good to be with someone who just knew what he wanted. The first few dates he paid for everything without even discussing it. Opened doors, pulled out my chair, the whole traditional thing. I felt myself relax into it, like this is what I'd been wanting. Someone who understood how to treat a woman without needing it explained. About a month in, Alex mentioned he thought it was cute that I had a career. Something about the way he said it rubbed me wrong. Asked him what he meant by that. He said, just that it's nice. I'm ambitious. But obviously once we got serious and started a family, I'd want to focus on that. I felt myself tense up. Told him I've worked really hard to build my career, and I'm not going to give it up for anyone. He said he wasn't asking me to give it up, just to reprioritize. Told him no, I'm not reprioritizing. My career is important to me. He seemed surprised by my reaction. Said he thought I wanted a traditional relationship based on how I'd been acting. I said, I want a partner who treats me well. That doesn't mean I want to be a housewife. He said he treats me well by paying for things and taking care of me. But if I want a completely equal modern relationship, he can adjust. I told him I don't want him to adjust. I want him to understand that treating me well and respecting my career aren't mutually exclusive. He looked confused. Said, so you want me to pay for everything and open doors and protect you, but also treat you like a complete equal? I said, yes, exactly. He laughed and said that doesn't make sense. I told him it makes perfect sense. He's just not willing to put in the effort to understand. He said, it sounds like I want all the benefits of traditional gender roles and modern equality, with none of the drawbacks of either. I ended the date early and stopped responding to his texts. Clearly, he was just another guy who didn't get it. But I kept thinking about what he'd said, about wanting all the benefits with none of the drawbacks. Is that what I was doing? No, that's not fair. I have plenty of drawbacks. I deal with sexism at work constantly. I have to fight for every bit of recognition and compensation. I navigate the world as a woman, which comes with inherent vulnerabilities and dangers, wanting men to step up in certain ways. Isn't asking for special treatment. It's asking them to acknowledge the reality of gender dynamics. Yes, I can advocate for myself in a meeting, and yes, I appreciate when a man intervenes with an aggressive creep at a bar. Those things both make sense in context. The context is that gender exists and affects everything, whether we want it to or not. Ignoring gender differences when they're relevant doesn't make you enlightened, it makes you naive. I felt better after working through that logic. I'm not being inconsistent. I'm being contextually appropriate. I mentioned this whole situation to my therapist. I've been seeing her on and off for a couple years for general stress and anxiety. I told her about Michael and Alex and the accusations of contradiction. She asked me how I decide which context calls for equality and which calls for traditional gender roles. I said it depends on the situation. She asked me to be more specific. I started explaining but realized I was kind of deciding on a case-by-case basis. Like I want equal pay because that's about fairness and overcoming discrimination. But I want men to pay for dates because that's about romance and courtship. And I want equal opportunities at work because I'm just as capable as any man. But I want men to protect me in dangerous situations because they're physically stronger. The therapist asked if I could see how someone might view that as picking and choosing based on what benefits me. I said, that's a reductive way to look at it. I'm not just choosing what benefits me. I'm choosing what makes sense, given the reality of each situation. She asked if I'd be okay with men doing the same thing, choosing when to treat me as an equal and when to invoke traditional gender roles based on what benefits them. I said that's different because men already have systemic power. When men pick and choose, it's about maintaining their advantage. When I do it, it's about navigating a world that's already stacked against me. Therapist just nodded and didn't push it further. But I left the session feeling unsettled. I've started paying more attention to my own thought patterns. Noticed that I had this way of evaluating situations based on an almost instantaneous calculation. Like when a check comes at a restaurant, there's this split second where I decide whether this is a situation where I should offer to split or a situation where I should expect him to pay. The decision happens so fast I barely notice I'm making it. Based on some combination of how traditional he's been acting, how much I like him, whether I want to see him again, how expensive the meal was, what the occasion is, all these factors collapse into a single position. Like, I'm observing the situation, and it resolves into one clear expectation. Same thing at work. When there's a physical task, like moving heavy boxes during an office reorganization, I immediately collapse into the position that men should handle it. But when there's a challenging project or leadership opportunity, I immediately collapse into the position that gender shouldn't matter. When a male coworker offers to help me with something technical, I have to quickly assess whether this is him being patronizing or genuinely helpful. And that assessment determines whether I respond with appreciation or offense. The decision happens in microseconds. Unconscious, automatic. But I'm definitely making a choice about which framework to apply. Equality framework or gender difference framework. Whichever one serves me better in that specific moment. Started to see Sarah's point about contradiction, but also started to see why the contradiction doesn't feel like a contradiction to me. Because in each individual moment, the position I take feels completely justified. It's only when you zoom out and look at the pattern that it seems inconsistent. But life isn't lived zoomed out. It's lived moment by moment. And in each moment, I'm just responding to the reality in front of me. Work, function came up. One of those networking mixer things with people from other companies in our industry. I went because these things are good for career development, even though I find them exhausting. Got into a conversation with a guy from a competitor firm, but we were talking about industry trends, and he mentioned his company was hiring for a senior position. I expressed interest, and we exchanged business cards. He said he'd send me the job description. Then he said we should get coffee sometime and discuss it more. I agreed, and we set up a time. Met him for coffee the following week. Conversation started professional, talking about the role and what they were looking for. I explained my background and qualifications. He seemed impressed. Then the conversation shifted slightly. He started asking more personal questions. Where I lived, what I did for fun, complimenting me in ways that felt less professional. Said something about how it would be great to have someone, like me, at their company. I started to feel like this was less of a job interview and more of him hitting on me. But I wasn't totally sure, and I didn't want to assume. Coffee ended, and he said he'd be in touch about next steps. He texted me that evening asking if I wanted to get drinks. No mention of the job. I felt disappointed and kind of used. Like he'd presented this as a professional opportunity, but really just wanted to hit on me. I didn't respond to his text. Told Sarah about it, and she asked if I'd been clear that I was only interested in discussing the job. I said I thought that was obvious given the context. She said maybe he thought I was interested in him personally. I said I was professionally friendly. That doesn't mean I'm interested. She said some guys can't tell the difference. I said that's not my problem. He presented it as a professional meeting and then made it personal. That's a bait and switch and it's gross. Sarah agreed. That was annoying. Then she asked if I'd ever met up with a guy under professional pretenses when I was actually interested in him personally. I immediately thought of a situation from a couple years ago. There was a guy who worked at a client company that I thought was attractive. I'd suggested we grab coffee to discuss the project timeline, when really I just wanted an excuse to spend time with him outside the office. He seemed interested. We got coffee, ended up dating briefly. I told Sarah that was completely different. She asked how. I said I wasn't in a position of power over him. I wasn't potentially dangling a job opportunity to get a date. The power dynamics were completely different. Sarah said, that's fair, but the basic premise was the same, using professional context as a cover for personal interest. I said, the context and power dynamics are what matter. You can't just strip those away and say it's the same thing. She dropped it, but I could tell she thought I was rationalizing. Maybe I was. I don't know. All I know is that when I did it, it felt harmless and natural. When the guy from the competitor firm did it, it felt manipulative and inappropriate. Those feelings are real, even if the actions look similar from the outside. Started seeing someone new. Guy named James. James was probably the closest I'd come to what I actually wanted. Successful, confident, treated me well, paid for dates without making it weird. Also respected my career and seemed genuinely interested when I talked about work. We'd been dating for a few months when he got a job offer in another city. Good opportunity, more money, better position. He was excited about it, and I was happy for him. Then he asked if I'd consider coming with him. Said he knew it was a big ask, but he really saw a future with us. I felt panic immediately. Told him I can't just uproot my career for a relationship. I've worked too hard to build my position and my professional reputation. He said he understood, but wanted me to at least think about it. Said there would be opportunities for me in the new city too. I could transfer within my company or find a new position. I told him it's not that simple. I'd be starting over, losing my seniority, my network, everything I've built. He said he'd be starting over too. That's what making a big move together means. I said, it's different for him. He's moving for a better job. I'd be moving for a relationship. He pointed out that if I found a job in the new city, I'd be moving for that job. The relationship would just be the catalyst. I said no. Everyone would see it as me following my boyfriend, giving up my career for a man. He said, who cares what people think if we're building a life together? I told him I care what people think. I care about not being that woman who sacrifices everything for a relationship. He went quiet. Then he said, would you want me to turn down this opportunity to stay here with you? I didn't answer right away because I did kind of want that. Wanted him to choose me over the job, but I also knew that was hypocritical given what I was saying. Told him, no, I wouldn't want him to turn it down. This is a great opportunity for him. He said, so I should sacrifice my career advancement for the relationship, but you shouldn't? I said, I'm not asking him to sacrifice anything. I'm just saying I can't move. He said, that means he has to choose between the job and the relationship. That's literally asking him to sacrifice one for the other. I felt frustrated because he was twisting my words. Told him he should take the job. We can try long distance. He said he didn't want to do long distance. He wanted to build a life with someone. We went back and forth for weeks. I kept thinking about what I actually wanted. Wanted him to turn down the job and stay with me, even though I'd never ask him to do that. Or wanted him to take the job and have it somehow not affect us. Or wanted him to take the job and for me to be able to come with him without it, meaning I was sacrificing my career. Wanted some option where nobody had to sacrifice anything. But that wasn't possible, and he eventually took the job and moved. We broke up. I was sad but also relieved. At least I hadn't compromised my principles. Hadn't become one of those women who gives up everything for a man. My career is important, and I made the right choice protecting it. Told myself that over and over. Few months later, one of my male colleagues, Jason, announced he was moving because his wife got a job opportunity in another state. He was leaving our company, seemed totally happy about it. I asked him if he was worried about finding a new position. He said he'd figure it out. His wife's opportunity was too good to pass up, and he was excited for her. Said they were partners, and sometimes that means supporting each other's advancement, even if it's inconvenient. I felt irrationally annoyed by this. Jason was giving up his job to follow his wife, and everyone thought it was noble and supportive. If I'd done, the same thing for James, people would have seen me as weak, as giving up my independence. Mentioned this to Sarah. She said, maybe I was projecting, and people wouldn't have judged me that way. I said, of course they would have. When a woman moves for a man, it's seen as capitulation. Sarah asked if I thought Jason was capitulating. I said no, but it's different for men. She asked how. I started to explain, but couldn't quite articulate it. Something about how men have inherent credibility in their careers, so they can take breaks or make moves without it defining them. Whereas women have to constantly prove ourselves, so any perceived sacrifice gets held against us. Sarah said that might be true, but also maybe I was using that as an excuse not to compromise. I told her I don't need excuses. I made the right decision for me. She said, okay, but did I actually make a decision, or did I just default to the position that required nothing of me? That hit harder than I wanted to admit. Had I actually weighed the options, or had I just immediately collapsed into the I can't sacrifice my career position because it was easier? Didn't want to think about it too much. Work has been going well at least. Got promoted to senior manager last year. Bigger team. More responsibility. Significant raise. Felt like validation that all my advocacy for myself had paid off. I'm getting the recognition and compensation I deserve. There's a younger woman on my team now, Melissa, reminds me of myself a few years ago. She's smart, ambitious, doesn't take shit from anyone. I've tried to mentor her, give her the support I wish I'd had coming up. A few weeks ago, Melissa came to me upset. Said one of the guys on the team, Kevin, had taken credit for her idea in a meeting. She'd proposed a new process improvement, and Kevin had presented it to leadership as his own concept. I told her that's unacceptable and I'd handle it. Called Kevin into my office and confronted him. He said he'd built on Melissa's initial idea and developed it further, so it was collaborative. I told him if it was collaborative, he should have presented it as such. Taking someone else's idea and presenting it as your own is plagiarism even in a business context. He got defensive, said he didn't think it was that big of a deal. I said it is a big deal, especially when a male team member takes credit for a female team member's work. We told him he needed to send an email to leadership, clarifying that the idea originated with Melissa. He did it, reluctantly. Melissa thanked me and said she appreciated me going to bat for her. I felt good about it, felt like this is what women in leadership should do, protect and advocate for other women. Then a few weeks later, there was a situation with a different team member. Young guy, Marcus, relatively new to the company. He'd made an error on a client deliverable. Nothing catastrophic, but definitely a mistake. I had to decide how to handle it. I could have brought it up in the team meeting as a learning opportunity. Could have addressed it privately. Could have covered for him and fixed it myself. I ended up fixing it quietly and mentioning it to him privately afterward. Told him to be more careful, but didn't make a big deal of it. Later, I thought about how I would have handled the same mistake from Melissa. Probably would have done the same thing, protected her and addressed it privately. But would I have done that for Kevin? Honestly, probably not. Probably would have been harsher, maybe even brought it up in the team meeting, because I don't feel the same protective instinct toward the men on my team. I advocate hard for the women and hold the men to a stricter standard. Is that wrong? Feels like it's correcting for broader systemic imbalances. Men generally get more slack and more second chances in professional environments. So me being harder on them is just balancing the scales. But also, if I'm the manager, I'm supposed to treat everyone equally, regardless of gender. I manage based on performance and behavior, not based on identity. Another contradiction I don't quite know how to reconcile. Present day now. I'm 30, senior manager, good salary, nice apartment, independent life. Not currently dating anyone. Most of my free time goes to work and friends and trying to maintain some kind of life balance. I still believe in equality, still advocate for myself, still fight against discrimination. But I'm also tired, in a way I can't fully explain. Tired of having to calculate the right position for every situation. Tired of defending choices that feel natural to me but look contradictory to other people. Tired of men not understanding what I want even though I can't always explain it myself. Sarah asked me recently what I'm actually looking for in a partner. I told her I want someone who's strong but not domineering. Someone who pays for dates but doesn't think that entitles him to anything. Someone who respects my career but also makes me feel taken care of. Someone who treats me as an equal but also treats me special. Someone who understands that I can advocate for myself in professional contexts but still wants to protect me in dangerous ones. Someone who doesn't need me financially but wants to invest in me anyway. Someone who's confident enough to lead but secure enough to not need to be in charge. Sarah said, "That sounds like I want someone who can read my mind." I said, "No, I want someone who understands nuance." She said, "It sounds like I want someone who will always collapse into whichever role benefits me most without questioning it." I told her that's not fair. She said, "Maybe not, but it's kind of true. I want a partner who intuitively knows when I want equality and when I want traditional gender roles without me having to specify. Someone who can hold both frameworks simultaneously and apply whichever one I'm operating from in any given moment." I said, "When you put it that way, it sounds unreasonable." She said, "Maybe it is unreasonable. Maybe I need to pick a lane. Either I want equality across the board or I want traditional gender roles across the board." I told her I don't want either of those things across the board. I want the flexibility to navigate different situations differently. She asked if I give men the same flexibility. I didn't have a good answer. Truth is, I don't give men the same flexibility. When a man invokes traditional gender roles in a way that benefits him, I call it sexism. When I invoke traditional gender roles in a way that benefits me, I call it preference. When a man wants equality in contexts where it benefits him, I say he's trying to avoid responsibility. When I want equality in contexts where it benefits me, I say I'm fighting discrimination. I can see the double standard when I really look at it. But I can also justify every individual instance. Because the context matters. The power dynamics matter. The history matters. Men and women aren't operating from the same position, so equal treatment doesn't mean the same treatment. I genuinely believe that, but I also know I'm using that principle to excuse contradictions that benefit me. Like both things are true at the same time. The contradictions are real and the justifications are real. I exist in both states until someone observes the pattern and forces me to collapse into one position or the other. And even then, I find ways to maintain the superposition. Because giving up either framework means losing something I want. If I commit fully to equality, I lose the benefits of traditional gender roles. Men stop paying for dates, stop protecting me, stop providing in the ways that make me feel secure. If I commit fully to traditional gender roles, I lose my professional equality. I lose my right to demand equal pay and equal opportunities and equal treatment, so I don't commit fully to either. I keep both possibilities alive. I'm both the feminist who demands equality and the woman who expects chivalry. Both the independent professional and the one who wants to be taken care of. Both the strong advocate for myself and the one who wants male protection. I'm both until the moment demands I be one. And then I'm whichever one serves me better. And I genuinely don't see another way to be. The world isn't set up for women to just choose one framework and stick with it. We're expected to be both strong and soft, independent and nurturing, equal and special. So I navigate that by being whatever I need to be when I need to be it. Maybe that makes me a hypocrite. Or maybe that makes me a realist. Probably both. Definitely both. I'm still both.